Welcome into this Telstra Virtual Event. I'm Justin Cleveland. And before we get to the panelists joining me here at the Wombat Room at 320 Pitt Street, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the On24 platform and what you can do. You'll see some of the widgets along the bottom of your screen. Feel free to click on them to access copies of the PowerPoint from today's presentation. You can see speaker bios at any time. You can also join the conversation by submitting your questions through the Q&A box. Also, if you have any trouble seeing anything on the screen or you want to move them around, it's very quick and easy. All you have to do, if you're on a Mac or on a PC, click the top bar to resize. You'll see in the lower right corner. Feel free to move things around and put them where you feel comfortable. If you're on a tablet, just pinch and zoom in the ways that you feel comfortable. If your audio freezes or you have any trouble with the video, please feel free to just restart or reload your bar. So, on today's presentation, joining me here in Sydney, first of all, Rocky Scopoletti, the Group General Manager for Telstra Enterprise Business and Government. Welcome in, Rocky.
Thank you, Justin.
Also in the room with us is Lisa Oldfield, a Technology Evangelist and Senior Account Director for DocuSign. Good morning, Lisa.
Hi, Justin. Thanks for having me.
And finally, Chris Patrick, a man who has a great deal of experience in helping businesses reduce paper bottlenecks and improving audit trails. So Chris is the Head of Service Delivery for Flexi Group. I'm Justin Cleveland. I am your host and moderator for our discussion today. Chris, welcome in.
Good to be here, Justin.
So those are the voices, and again, you can check out the bios at any point by logging on to the bar on the bottom of your screen. So, as you can tell from my accent, I am not a native Australian. After I came here about a year ago, I decided to sell my house in the United States. It was a tough decision. It was a house I loved very much, but it was the right decision for me financially at the time. But in the closing hours, in order to complete the sale, I had to sign and FedEx overnight to the other side of the world paper documents that if they weren't in hand by close of business, which is about 36 hours later, they would sink the sale and it would cost me thousands of dollars. It was stressful, it was bad timing, and I thought it was absolutely ridiculous in a modern environment where I can do my banking from the U.S., on my phone, from here, while sitting, at the harbor with a fruity cocktail with a little, umbrella sitting in it. I thought that was just silly at this point in our time, and apparently it is what I found out, is that, this is the kind of thing that we have processes in place to help prevent, but there are a lot of people who have trouble adopting them and figuring out new and different ways to interact with customers. So that's what we're going to talk about today, kind of the way businesses have changed over the last 10, 15, 20 years, even in the last year. Things are literally changing overnight. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about today, and some of the new technologies that we can adopt to make interacting with customers easier and making doing business with each other a whole lot easier as well. So that's where I bring in our panel here today to talk about the developments in technology that have allowed businesses to reduce their dependency on legacy systems. I'm going to start with Rocky. So Rocky, you've been working with a variety of companies that even 10 years ago were almost completely paper-driven. I mean, I can remember working in a factory not 15 years ago where every piece of paper, every open PO was on the top drawer, every closed PO was in the bottom drawer, and it was our goal in life to move those open pieces of paper to the bottom piece of paper. But if something got screwed up, we were in trouble. So what have you seen over the last 10 years in the way that businesses are interacting?
Well, I think so thank you, Justin. Look, I think that's a great way to begin the conversation, because it's now actually sort of flipped right around. So if you begin with thinking, well, why did we make so many of our functions and business processes, create, store and manage a lot of documentation? Often it was for risk management and compliance reasons. But what we're now actually sort of seeing is the complete sort of flip around, where from a risk and compliance perspective, they're actually becoming the advocates for digital, because digital is now actually creating much greater referenceability and taking risk out of the business by having documentation created, stored and managed digitally. So, it's interesting sort of talking to a wide variety of different organisations throughout Asia Pacific, throughout Europe and also the US. We are now actually really sort of seeing those groups become advocates for digital. So that, to me, there's been really three key themes that have sort of I think are really worth bringing into the conversation. You know, the digital channel is really front and centre, and I think, you know, we're now sort of seeing how important the digital channel is becoming, not just only from a B2C perspective, but from a B2E perspective as well. It's in terms of how organisations are driving greater degrees of productivity and improving customer experience through their workforces who are interfacing with customers out in the field. So I think sort of the digital channel is really the first one. The second is to do with data and analytics. And, you know, this is just going to continue to become an increasing priority for organisations. And again, when you think about sort of data, what's really important to sort of think about here is how inaccurate a lot of data capturing systems are. And so when you think about processing, you know, insurance companies and a lot of organisations have got massive processing centres that are just dealing with high proportions of error rates. So this whole concept of self-curation in terms of getting quality data, cleansed data, curated by the customer or by the employer, quality data coming into the enterprise is just introducing, you know, great degrees of productivity and efficiency.
Well, so yeah, you're not talking about just replacing paper data with just a paper analog, which is, you know, a scanned version of the document, which essentially presents the same problems.
We're talking about quality improvement, and you know, so you know, if you capture quality, accurate information right up front, then you're eliminating all of the inefficiencies in the processes that are downstream in the enterprise. And then the third area is really about mobile first. We're now sort of seeing organisations really begin from a design thinking perspective about a mobile first approach, which means, you know, in B2E perspective, thinking about their employees and how they work and operate in the field, and how can we equip them with the right tools to be able to perform their work much more efficiently and effectively. How do we think about our customers who want to engage us increasingly through mobile devices first? Yeah. So I'd say, you know, those are the sort of three areas: digital channel, data analytics, and mobile first. They're three key themes that are sort of emerging, irrespective of where you are in the world, has been a really important set of priorities.
Yeah. Do you see it developing here in the Asia Pacific region more? I mean, are we following the trends of the United States? Where is it starting? Who's leading the way?
Look, it's. I wouldn't actually say that there's anyone that's particularly leading it now, because the use of mobile technologies in developing and developed worlds is just reaching saturation levels. Throughout Asia, for example, Asians have a very enthusiastic users and adopters of smartphone technology. In fact, Singapore's the most heavily penetrated smartphone market in the world. So you're sort of seeing, I think, consumers embrace mobile technology in their personal lives, and so the spillover into their professional lives is a natural extension of who they are and the way they want to live, work and play.
Yeah. So we talked about very briefly the idea that there were systems where we just put a piece of paper, and God forbid there's a fire, then all of that is gone. But we are now, I think a lot of us are in the digital point where, you know, I've got things up on Box and I've got them on Dropbox, and if I lose a password or forget that's where I put it, you know, maybe it's on a Google Drive and it's not as secure and it shouldn't be there, you know. So we're lacking that place where all of that data is collated and then put together. How has that improved recently?
Look, I think with organisations that we'll talk more about today, such as DocuSign, that are really creating enterprise-grade quality services. I think that's what's really making the difference here, is that enterprises are sort of saying, look, you know, I want to invest in technology partners, right, who have, from a design perspective, accommodated my enterprise requirements, rather than perhaps a lot of the, you know, startup organisations who, you know, for various reasons perhaps don't meet the standards that are really required at an enterprise level.
You know, I think of myself as young and flexible, though I'm growing less of each with every passing day. But I have trouble thinking of software as a service, in particular, like cloud services like Office 365. Now, I'm used to, I go to the store, I buy my software, and then it's mine. And that's it, you know, and I don't have to worry about, you know, it going away. But increasingly, that's the way the world is going to, because everything is continually then improving. Is there a mindset shift that we have to, get across ourselves? To deal with these things?
Look, that's a great area. And look, my observation is this. I think, the days of hanging on to legacy and, creating everything on your own, I think are long gone. And I think most of the technology thought leaders in organisations accept that they just can't sort of build or have internalise a lot of these functions, and so they again are looking at what is best of breed. Who are the limited set of partners that we want to work with, who provide us with the agility to be able to onboard and introduce these services quickly, efficiently and effectively.
Right, and do it in a way that is going to benefit my organization as opposed to just, again, going out and buying a service or buying a piece of software and saying, okay, now make it work.
Indeed.
Yeah. So then the other end of it is we needed for a long time, and I mentioned the file cabinets, we needed a space to put things. Now, granted, I was working for a small packaging manufacturer, so it only took up, a meter by meter square, but the larger, as you scale organizations, they don't scale directly, they scale exponentially to the amount of space needed for storage costs. Is there a benefit to, obviously there's a benefit going digital there because it's just going to take up less physical space, but is it as secure in long term?
Oh, look, I think, organisations are looking to providers such as Telstra, who manage some of probably the most important infrastructure assets on behalf of defence, government and the like in the country, that when it comes to storage, again, looking at where best of breed providers are. But I'd say on storage it's sort of one of these things that you want to use what you require, and so infrastructure as a service, storage as a service, those are things that enterprises are now embracing in an on-demand sort of world.
And you don't have the one IT guy that, and I worked in a lot of companies where we had the one guy who was on call for 3 different cities who was there in case stuff blew up. And when it blew up, and if it blew up in multiple places, we were in trouble. So if it's held off-site, you don't have the one person whose responsibility, God forbid he's on holiday,
Yeah.
So yeah, it sounds, I think I like it in theory, but I'm still hesitant. Today I printed out my introduction on a piece of paper because for me, there's a comfort factor there in having that physical piece in front of me. And yeah, I could when I watch sports on TV on the weekend, I've got my tablet in one hand, I've got my TV on, and I've got my iPhone in the other hand. And I'm entirely too engaged. And yeah, watching sports that way is fantastic, but doing that professionally, there's still, when I was on the radio for years, I would still print out my scripts. Not because I needed them, I had them on the computer, but one time that computer failed on me and I was, left on the air going, so weather, huh? Which is, obviously not useful.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and look, I think organisations are also trying to manage a change in how they deal with change culturally, getting their staff, getting their employees to work differently. And there's a lot of really, really interesting pioneering organisations that are creating this sort of workplace of the future. But what I would also say is that I think change is actually coming more from employees because of what's happening in their personal lives. If you think about the way that we buy music now, we have completely changed the way we buy music, yet we're quite happy and comfortable for it to sit up in a cloud. So I think all of those sort of developments that are going on in the consumer markets are helping sort of facilitate sort of change right down. But I'm sympathetic to your sort of lounge room sort of way of working there, because I was thinking to myself, well, where do you put the remote control? You've got the tablet and the smartphone in.
You download the app, right? Download the app.
There it is, Lisa. There it is.
And a place to put your beer. Come on.
So
somehow I've managed it. But I think it's a very interesting point talking about consumer behavior driving business behavior, because it's been so easy to do things with our leisure time now digitally, and I'm finally coming around to the idea of my movies in the cloud.
Yeah.
And because I just don't have that much storage space for all of the things that I want to keep.
Yep. And here's the thing, when we think about the workplace, what we've got to remind ourselves of is today, 1 in 5 people in the workforce are made up of Generation Y. By 2020, they're going to make up 1 in 3 in the workplace. So, the way this generation has grown up digitally will naturally sort of shape the work environment, the tools that they prefer to use, and the like. So I think those things, that demographic change, I think is also going to drive, I think, a lot of the changes that we can expect to see.
So I want to talk about compliance briefly, and Lisa, I'm going to have you talk about this a bit, because there was something that you mentioned as we were chatting before the call about compliance that I think is interesting. Now, there are laws passed that allow for digital transactions now. Before that, was it just impossible? Was it? I mean, what were the barriers before that?
I think it was literally because DocuSign hadn't entered the Australian market, because here in Australia we've had the Electronic Transactions Act passed federally in 2000, the states followed suit in 2001, and having a look at legislation worldwide, I don't think there is another country that has more accommodative legislation. So we completely accept electronic signatures, except for 2 use cases, which are wills and divorces, which is a shame, because you can actually write a personal message. So you can say, I hate you, you can keep the cube. But no, for now, divorces are off limits.
I think it's going to save a lot of people a lot of griefs down the road. But no, that's interesting that those would be carve-outs. Wills I don't really understand, because those are such complex documents. I feel like you would want as much possible, but I'm sure there was somebody along the way pointed out a decent reason. I
think it's literally it's an education process. So business and government is learning all the time that electronic signatures, from a compliance perspective, are far easier to back than a traditional wet signature. With an electronic signature, if you're going to court, we can show the signer's signature, but also the time date stamp, where they signed it, when they signed it. There's a unique identifier. If we put other layers of authentication over the top, that's all being captured as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. From a privacy perspective, obviously we're volunteering this data. Because we want to make this as legal as possible and as binding as possible. But yeah, there's a lot of data that's being drawn in here, and I don't know that people, when they just think of eSignature, are thinking of it in those terms. Because obviously, on my smartphone there is a ton of information about me, where I am. Somebody just noticed today that I posted from Surrey Hills, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't realize you were in Surrey Hills today." There's those little things that can identify you and where you are, and ultimately, I think, verify who you are. So yeah, that's really interesting. And what I've been very happy about in my time here in Australia is how well the country has adopted digital technologies. And I think it's well ahead of the curve, especially in the United States, for things like NFC payments, for things like internet banking or using your phone to do banking. Now, I have a U.S. bank in the United States, and I have an app, and they're fine, but compared to my NAB and Commonwealth Bank apps, I mean, they're not even close to the kind of usability and functionality that I can do. So I think Australia is far ahead of the curve.
And it's interesting you mentioned Commonwealth Bank, Justin, because they were very early adopters of the DocuSign technology, and they recently won the Australian Banking and Finance Award with their implementation of DocuSign. For existing customers, it used to take 8 days for funds to be available in their accounts, now less than 4 hours. So they really are a market leader and an evangelist.
Yeah. So I want to reach out to you in the audience and ask you a question here. Primarily, what are challenges that you're facing in your office environment? Because it can be staffing ultimately, and there are a variety of issues that can arise. But in terms of your data and your storage, what are your problems? Do you have an issue with centralized reporting, making sure that the data is trackable, is verifiable? Is it admin? Is it complex reporting? Is it increased mobility? Or is it the customer experience? Ultimately, that is a challenge to you. I'll give you a minute to talk about those questions. But like I said, I think in the Australian market, we are doing very, very well to engage with people digitally. Now, Chris, why don't I ask you, from a customer experience perspective, how do people react to going digital? Is there hesitation?
Look, the experience for us overall has been really positive. Our business originates customers at point of sale, so we provide finance for customers who are making purchases in store. And we've come from a place where all of our contracts were completed in hard copy and faxed back to our office. We had a lot of problems with the quality of the documents, and also with customers signing the documents incorrectly, making changes to the documents before they came back. And once we put in the digital process, I mean, it took away all of those issues immediately. So our retailers loved it, but even for the customers who were completing the contracts, they found it really easy to use, and the feedback from them has been nothing but positive.
Excellent. So looking at the answers to our polling question, it looks like people are fairly well split between saving money, which I completely understand, being a very cheap person myself, complex compliance, and increased mobility. And I think the mobility aspect is one that we should really focus in on here, in particular in dealing with customers. So why don't I actually go ahead and bring in Smarter Office Solutions, and talk through things. Rocky, I think this is a good area for you. Talk me through what's our history been in getting to digital today, and what have we tried in the past?
Look, I think the way that we've evolved has been sort of primarily based around location. When we think about work, we've in the past thought about work as a place you go to, whereas now I think we're removing that sort of physical aspect of it. So I think bring your own device. I think the fact that and mobility again has really sort of decoupled location with the work environment. And so if you look at sort of occupancy, particularly for businesses that do have large sort of facilities in suburban or even CBD areas, the occupancy rates are never at full capacity, because you've got a large proportion of your workforce that's working out in the field or is moving from building to building and the like. So I think there's been a big shift in our attitudes towards work, flexible working, bring your own devices. All of these things I think are reshaping the way organisations think about work.
Is that a worker-driven thing, that people are demanding more flexibility, or that offices are seeing benefits and just offering it?
I think it's both. I think to become an attractive employer, I think flexible working has to form a very important part of your terms of employment to be an attractive employer. And so if you look at all of the organisations that are sort of rated as being sort of leading or highly desirable places to work, you'll find that flexible working forms a very, very important component of their operations and modes of working. So I think digital has evolved from really a desktop environment to now sort of being much more mobile. You sort of see that playing out in just computing, where most computing now is based on sort of laptops rather than desktops. And if you look at the enthusiasm to which tablet devices have been lapped up by Australians now, where 2 in 3 people in Australia are now using a tablet device for either work or leisure. And we've got to remind ourselves that's happened in a very quick period of time. Tablets have only been here for 4 years, and in 4 years, 2 in 3 Australians are now using the tablet device for their work and leisure. So I think again our behaviours, and I think Australia is very progressive digitally, and I think enterprises in Australia have kept up with that pace of change.
Is there an issue with collaboration, though? Because for the longest time, it was the water cooler was where you had ideas that you bounced off of someone, or you saw someone walking down the hall. Do you see that we're losing the chance for collaboration, or is it still there, or does it make it better using?
Oh, look, I think technology is in fact democratizing collaboration, because we've now got the ability to collaborate much more broadly. We can collaborate globally using social media. And so I think, collaboration has actually played a very, very important role also in this sort of flexible working, where you can, collaborate with teams that you might work with, irrespective of where you are, using sort of everything from common document sharing tools all the way through to a full immersive video experience. That's all possible today.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, interestingly, one of the sectors that have been, I guess, very aggressive in adopting DocuSign technology being the professional services market, so legal firms and accounting firms. So just talking some more to Rocky's point about mobility, it actually makes more sense to have an auditor at a customer's site and to no longer tie them to an office so that they can sign things like audit reports and the like from their tablet. It makes so much more sense. One of the firms I'm dealing with is about to relocate to Barangaroo, and the floor space they're taking is 1/3 the size of their current space because they're introducing hot desking, but they said now with DocuSign, their partners and their staff are no longer tied to an office. They don't need a printer, they don't need a scanner.
So I think if you build on sort of Lisa's example here, we're not just talking about productivity here, we're also talking about employee and customer experience, the ability to actually complete a document by having a professional with a client in their place of work, fitted out with all of the right sort of, just even a tablet, or even to be remote. So we're talking about collaboration before, the ability to actually share a DocuSign document or share a document collaboratively, remotely with a client and have the client execute that document remotely, is a fantastic experience for both participants there.
Now, the next step, I think, is you can unlock your phone with your fingerprints. There's talk of retinal scanning in consumer technology. There's, DNA possibilities down the road. Are we going to run into hurdles because that seems a bit more obtrusive down the road? And particularly, Chris, you from the customer perspective, do you think that people will adopt this or will they be hesitant?
I think, and to Rocky's point earlier, as people move more into that digital space, they get used to transacting with companies online. I think the take-up, it will be a natural progression. So I think, no doubt these products will continue to develop over time. There'll be new technology introduced, and I don't think there'll be any pushback. I think customers will continue to keep up.
Yeah, I gave my thumbprint very quickly and easily away to my phone, and I agree. I think it'll be
my phone, I know this thing's tracking where I am. I get up in the morning, it tells me that it's 38 minutes to my office, so it knows where I'm going for the day.
It knows how well you slept last night.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a little bit freaky when you first see it, and I think people get used to those things and conditioned it by their personal lives, and that'll translate to business.
Yeah.
And so I think just to round that out, this sort of notion of physically signing documents, I think is going to pass real quick, and that's because we are quickly becoming accustomed to using our thumbs or our fingers to open up devices. Second factor authentication. All of these things are changing our behaviour in our personal lives. And increasingly will spill over into our professional lives as well. So the way we think about, I think, completing documentation, irrespective of what it is, and using tools like DocuSign to complete documentation is just going to become a natural extension of what we do.
Because the signature piece is really on the emotional. What the electronic signature is everything we've captured about the transaction, so things like the date and the time and who the signing parties are. It's really just leaving your mark. So we're investing heavily in biometrics at DocuSign. You can already sign documents with your thumbprint. But that's the way we see things going.
Yeah, and it makes sense. It's just a physical analog. Is the signature? It's just a vestige of something that used to be common. It was all you needed was to get your credit card was a signature, and now that seems stupid, frankly, looking back, that, all I have to do is sign a name and you're not even really going to ever verify that it was actually me. So yeah, it makes sense as we move forward that we lose those. You on the call, I would like to take a look on your screen. You'll see a question for you. What kind of digital or automated processes are you already using in your office today? I want to get a sense of where you are on your digital implementation journey. And when we move on from this question, actually, listen, we'll start talking about this with you. What's DocuSign's journey been to getting digital signature? Because you mentioned you're going toward the biometrics and the more secure methods. Where have you come from and where are you going to?
So we developed the world's first electronic signature solution back in 2002, which seems like an eon ago in the software as a service industry. But we are so much more than that now. It's unfortunate, I guess, our name is DocuSign because people think that's all we do. Really, what we present to our customers is digital transaction management, so an end-to-end solution where we can take our customers' data, their forms, pre-populate them. So if you think about it, say for example my bank, if they're sending me a form, they already know my name, they know my email address, those details. It's kind of offensive that they're asking me to fill that in again. So completing that information, then authenticating that I'm me, so spending a lot of money, a lot of R&D on authentication methods. Then when that's done, we have a really powerful workflow tool which will then determine what happens with my document next. Does that trigger funds, for example, to be available in my account? If it's an HR system, does that mean that business cards are generated and an office is available for me? And then, of course, underpinning all of that, being able to report on everything that's happening.
Right.
So people that are signing my documents, when did they read them? When did they open them? When did they sign?
Yeah, I think it's funny because my tax accountant here in Australia is a bit stuck in the past processes, and we had to print out, sign, scan, and send my tax return, which to me was I thought we were beyond this. And where are we at for governmental acceptance, particularly of new transaction technologies, and how is the government taking it? Because I feel like for public adoption, that's going to be a big piece.
Yeah, look, very readily accepting. So we're talking to a number of large government departments where they are just drowning in bureaucracy and paper. And they want to improve the customer experience too. Interestingly, whether it's in government or enterprise, one of the key factors has been improving the customer experience. So if you're now saying to your customer, you no longer have to find a printer, you no longer have to find a scanner or email or fax, you can sign on your device, wherever you are at any time. That's a big thing. And we look at customers like CBA, where their NPS or Net Promoter Score, which measures the customer's level of satisfaction, have increased dramatically since implementing DocuSign.
So the end user, I think, is ultimately the barrier here, because companies can be very happy to adopt it, but if there isn't something that I can do it on quick and easily, it's not going to matter, ultimately. If I have to log onto a computer, a big, long system where there's, a 16-character key password that changes randomly, So what can we do to verify security, and what does DocuSign do to basically ensure that everything is kosher?
Okay, no, sure. Well, we do multi-layer authentication, but first level authentication is the email address. So, I know that Justin's email address, I won't shout it out on the call, but call me later. I will send something to you. I know that it's Justin receiving that. I get you to sign, and we'll go through the process of signing in a minute. But if it is particularly sensitive, I can put extra layers of authentication in. So I might ask you to also include an access code. I could generate an SMS to your phone that you also have to enter before you can access and sign the documents. Even doing things like knowledge-based questions, where we work with companies like Veda or Green ID and say, okay, Justin, here's 4 addresses. Which one of these did you live in 7 years ago?
Wow, you're asking me to remember things that I right now I'm not sure I could.
You have to go back into the folder tab and look at that.
Yeah, I've got that written down somewhere. Yeah, that's I think that's really, really useful. And I've seen things come up like that. I'm like, how did you know that? How could you know that? But that's a good layer of authentication, because if you don't, then there's an obvious issue that's come through there.
You're lucky, not Justin.
Yeah. So let's actually talk through the digital transaction value proposition, and particularly starting with issues. Because if a technology doesn't solve a problem, who cares? Why does it exist? So what are the key problems? And maybe this is a Chris question. What are the problems that you are seeing out there that are solvable?
I guess, the problems that we had experienced were some of the things that we've talked about today. A business that was reliant on paper to drive process and drive workflow. A business that was struggling to keep up with the storage demands that come from using paper to run your business. And I guess the biggest issue that we've solved with this is the error rates that we were receiving on the contracts. So up to 10% of the contracts that were signed by our customers came in with errors on them, which we weren't able to settle. And that leads to a heap of rework, not only for us, but for our retailers. And we're also asking our customers to return to the store to re-sign paperwork. So it's a terrible customer experience and a heap of wastage.
Literally nothing in the world makes me madder than asking me to come back and do something I've already done. And it should have been done right the first time.
Yeah. And I literally had a team of people who were deployed on pipeline management in our business, and their only job was to come in each day and correct those errors. And overnight, with the implementation of DocuSign, I was able to repurpose that team and move them onto profit driving activity rather than administration.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look at other issues in the paper-based world. Stuff gets lost. People forget, as Chris said, people forget to complete a field. There's nothing more annoying than having to go back and re-sign. And the drama you've created for your customer. Like I said, you've got to get them to find the system, like a printer or a scanner or a fax, or even snail mail to try and get that information back to you. So with DocuSign, what companies are doing is now getting really important documents back, correct and complete without any need to rekey in minutes and hours, not days.
Yeah.
So
the point on reliance on traditional forms of postage is an interesting one. The busiest time of year for our business is Christmas. That's also the busiest time of year for the postal service because everyone's sending cards.
Yeah.
And the postal service literally bogs down during December, and all of our retailers are screaming they want to get paid, and they're writing double the volume they usually are. And if we're waiting on contracts to come in via post, it can really slow that process down.
And if you think about most industries and businesses do have cycles.
Yeah.
And seasonality sort of influences a lot of that. And so there will be periods where organisations, just through the sheer volume of stuff that might be coming in. So if you look at the 30th of June in financial services, it's a big, that month leading up to the 30th of June, prepaying interest for marginal loans, for example, is a big area of activity in a wealth management business. And often customers will just miss the opportunity, the tax opportunity associated with that, because they've missed the window of opportunity in terms of days to complete the paperwork, to get it into their wealth manager, get it processed and the like. Using solutions like DocuSign means that you can do it in real time. You can do it up to the last hour on the 30th of June, which is fantastic.
But we'd do it earlier. You could.
I guess we're talking about a lot of customer-facing activity here, but as you can see here on the screen, businesses are also talking to suppliers, to partners, to their employees. If I have a look at the process that I went through when I started with DocuSign, I got the verbal, yes, we'd like you to join. Obviously, my VP let HR know. They've entered me into their existing HR system. A very simple API call triggered new onboarding paperwork to be generated within DocuSign, so things like tax file declaration, my employment contract. Everything had been pre-populated that they already knew about me. That came to me on my tablet. I was actually at the pub, which I found out my boss was able to tell because of the geolocation service on DocuSign later on.
And your blood alcohol content.
Not quite. Don't give him any ideas. But so I was able to complete that while I was out having a nice drink. But what I didn't realise at the time was that had generated some really cool workflow in the background. So without me having to find a scanner or a printer or a fax, that's gone directly back to them. HR got a copy of the completed record. I got a copy for my record. But then it let payroll know to set me up for remuneration and super. It let security know that, okay, we need to provide building access cards for Lisa when she starts. And it also meant that IT had a machine ready for me. All my logins were set up. So I was ready to start day one. And the really interesting thing about that, we've got that process so down pat that we've got over 1,000 people at DocuSign. We only have 3 people in our HR department worldwide because everything is so streamlined. And literally those 3 people spend most of their time sitting talking to our customers' HR departments on how they can eliminate paper and streamline processes.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think about when we talk about DocuSign, I imagine it being, because this is the world I live in, business to consumer. That's it. It's a contract, it's a deal, it's a sale, that's it. But yeah, there are a lot of other deals that a business ultimately needs to do in order to operate. And if you can put it all in one chain, I think that's going to be very, very useful. I had a question come in from the audience that I think is an extremely important one, and that is it's obvious that we're going digital in the future. Mm-hmm. So how do we convince the people who are perhaps gripping their piece of paper and pry it from my cold dead hand? How do we convince them that this is going to be a good system for them?
I think if someone can use email, they can use DocuSign. I look at my father, who is 70, and he was someone who literally would write a reply to an email and have his secretary type it. But now he's retired. He breeds horses and he sells them into syndicates. And I've set up a couple of really easy templates, and it is so easy to use. It's literally drag and drop. Where he can send out syndicate forms to different buyers from his tablet or his PC and know exactly what's going on. He's got buyers in Singapore, in Hong Kong. The lovely thing about DocuSign is it will automatically pick up from the browser locale what someone's language preference is. So if it's a buyer in China, it's coming to them in simplified Chinese. If it's Indonesian, in Indonesia, it's coming to them in Indonesian. Yeah, I think we give older people a hard time.
And I don't think it's necessarily a generational thing.
No, I don't either.
Differentiations. Like I said, I am much more comfortable, though I'm on my computer all the time, I'm much more comfortable with that piece of paper.
And look, I would say, I'd agree with Lisa. I think we give them too much of a hard time. I think, again, come back to, if you think about the change in your own personal life and what you are now doing, particularly through mobile devices, irrespective of your age, we are behaving very, very differently and very digitally, and there is a natural spillover from what you're doing in your personal life into your professional life. And again, if you come back and think about tablets, tablets weren't just sort of something that was adopted by sort of Gen Ys. Quite the contrary. It's adopted, virtually by the whole population. So, and when you think about what we do over tablets, we don't sort of naturally just hit print. We are storing a lot more of our content digitally. So, I think the pace of change is occurring probably much faster than perhaps what we sort of give credit for.
Yeah. And I mentioned before that there's a governmental component to this, and another question has come in, and I just dealt with the Justice of Peace, JP, the other day, and they had to stamp every piece of paper that I had and then put their signature on it. Is that something that we can lead a charge to? I mean, how do we change that system where a JP is just, I mean, they're everywhere and they're essential to life here in Australia, to getting things done. I mean, what can we do to help digitize that process and really make life easier for a lot of people?
So in America, and we're starting it here too, we have an eNotary program, so JPs would have their own free DocuSign account. So basically we would just digitize that current function. But in terms of things like a witness signature, that is often irrelevant now because of DocuSign, because we've captured all that other information about the signature. It's not just me sitting there verifying that someone put pen to paper. DocuSign has captured all that background information, every artefact that surrounds the signing process.
To that point, our contracts, when they were hard copy, every signature was witnessed. And that was to make sure that someone was watching the customer sign, that person had looked at their ID and confirmed that it was them that was signing the paperwork. With DocuSign, using the authentication that DocuSign has built in, we're confident each time that it's the actual customer who's signing the paperwork. We know where they're signing from, we know the email address they use to access. We're using the access code functionality as well. Yeah. So we generate a password and SMS it out to them. So that need for the witness signature has been removed.
Yeah. So let's run through, Lisa, some of what DocuSign can do. We can't do a live demonstration, but I do want to run through essentially what it is. Now, we've talked through a bit of, obviously, what DocuSign is. So we'll just jump into what's the process.
Okay, terrific. So this first screen we're seeing is known as the DocuSign console. And this is where users would create templates. So you can create a document once and be able to reuse it over and over again. So ATO forms, tax file number declarations, your own particular sales orders, for example. You can also initiate ad hoc documents there for signing. And this is where you would track the progress of particular transactions. But to get started, step one, first of all, I upload a document from my computer. So I can do that locally or from a cloud drive, such as Box or Google Drive, Dropbox and the like. Or I could choose a pre-formatted document, so users would have access to a template library. So if I'm in HR, I'd be able to access all the HR forms. If I'm in sales, I have all my sales orders available to me there. In the second stage, that's where I add all my recipients, and it's worth noting here that DocuSign accommodate multiple signatories. So we can have sequential signing, we can have simultaneous signing. That works really well in real estate, where particularly now, this is very big in real estate with the likes of Ray White and McGrath and Remax. the 3 R's, all rolling this out very aggressively. If you have perhaps a couple, wife might be at home, husband might be fly out worker down a mine. If they're trying to rent a property or sell their home, it used to be so painful to try and get both parties to sign. Now, and they were signing a facsimile of the document. Now both are signing the original at their leisure and a lot more quickly and conveniently. And then third stage is where I place my tag. So where I'm asking for particular fields, so name, address, the signature, and it's that's it. It really is that easy. And then we select send. And then if we have a look at the next page here, Justin, this is what the recipient will receive. So they've got an email alert from me asking to sign via DocuSign. The alert that comes to them will be branded with my company's corporate livery and logo. The alert doesn't contain any attachments. It's simply a secure link to the DocuSign website. And this is where we commence the signing the signing process. So they'll see, they'll be guided step by step. So next, start. For the first time, the DocuSign recipient will be asked to draw their signature, or they can choose a stylised signature to reflect their consent to the terms and conditions of the document. And then once the recipient has completed all the required fields, the document will be completed and encrypted. Tamper-proof copies go to each party. And that's the process done. It really is that simple.
So then the signature aspect, like we mentioned, is sort of just the legacy. It is the final step. But ultimately, the proof of purchase, the proof of everything is in that metadata, it's in all of the information.
And if we have a look at the next screen, really good point there, Justin. This is what we call a certificate of completion, and this will ensure that everything that's being signed is above board and legally compliant. So it records all the artefacts to the signing process. So as I said before, the time, date stamp, the IP address, when and where it was signed. So that's what you go to court with.
Yeah.
So, Perry Mason would have a much easier job with DocuSign than trying to get a handwriting expert in. So.
That's fantastic. It's not a difficult process, but I do want to talk about the process of implementation, because I think there may be some challenges there. And this is, Chris, where you've done a lot of work with Flexi Group and with other companies, working with them to help implement signature tracking technologies and digital transaction technologies. Take us through.
Yeah, I guess, really we had two options when we rolled out DocuSign. The first was to use it manually, so not connected to our systems. And that would involve generating contracts in the traditional way, but rather than email them out to the customer, import them into the DocuSign console and push them to our customers. It's, it's effective for one-offs and documents you're doing on an ad hoc basis. But our business is really geared around processing high volume. So we chose to integrate DocuSign into our back-end systems. So we're using an API, and when contracts are generated, they're delivered straight into DocuSign. The templates are applied, and they're then pushed out to the customer.
So what's DocuSign's liability if something is forged and you are the one saying, we have this paper record of it, what is it?
So we can't stop people from committing fraud, but the body of evidence, the certificate of completion, will show if the document's been tampered with. And that comes from an independent third party being DocuSign, which is another one of the reasons a lot of large corporates want to go with DocuSign, because they don't want to, say, have a tick box. And then if they go to court with little consumer, it's the big bad bank against Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It's them being able to roll out DocuSign to say, this complies with global legislation on electronic signatures, and we can prove that you signed it and you signed it legitimately and nothing's been tampered with.
Just on that, look, I think it's worth discussing also that DocuSign creates a deterrent. In fact, for people to create forgery, for the robustness of its digital footprint and risk management processes behind it. So it's in fact, I would say, taken a lot of risk out of the business. So what about?
This is a question that I get asked quite often. What do we do if someone forges a contract? And I think it's helpful to bring it back to paper. So what do we do if someone forges a paper contract?
Yeah.
And everyone knows the answer to that.
Yeah.
We try and find out the person who committed fraud, and we would pursue them. It's exactly the same in the electronic space.
Yeah.
There's probably a lesser scope, a more narrow scope for people to commit fraud because we do have a whole lot more information about where the document was signed and how it was accessed. But there's always going to be a risk there that people can forge documents, and I think that's there regardless of whether we're using electronic or wet signature.
And the other thing that I'd say as well is that if you are dealing with documents that are sensitive to or susceptible in that area, by including some of the features with DocuSign, such as the second factor authentication or the like, if forgery has occurred, the ability for the right legal authorities to pursue that is much more robust than what it would be possibly otherwise.
So then, Chris, and this is a follow-up and sort of a tangential to that topic, is then legacy systems already exist. We've spent a lot of money developing CRMs. How can we then integrate this into a CRM, and what's the process for that like, and what have the challenges been?
So we took an approach where we integrated DocuSign step by step. The first thing that we did was we integrated with our back-end using the API so that our back-end system would continue to generate the contract. DocuSign would then send it out to the customer. We would then log into the DocuSign portal and download that PDF. Guys in the office would have a look through it, make sure they were happy with it, attach it to the loan in our back-end and create the disbursements. Once we'd completed that initial development, and we were happy and we knew that it was working, we went back and automated the return of the contract. So DocuSign now feeds the contract directly into our back end. Our back end scrapes the information that's been populated into the document, populates that into our systems, and we've automated the disbursement process. So I guess we decided to take it step by step, solve one problem at a time, and I think by doing that, it was a pretty low risk approach. So we didn't experience a huge amount of challenges.
So there is still a manual aspect to this, and there's still eyeballs on this. And I think one thing that may be concerning is that it's gone completely digital, and it's just computers talking to computers.
So we kept the eyeballs on it for about 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
We made sure that there was no gaps and no holes in it at all. After that 6-month period, completed a review. There'd been no issues. We were confident that it was working, and it was compliant, and it was nice and tight. And we've now automated it to the point where people aren't eyeballing those contracts. The systems are talking to each other, and that's just happening.
And auditors, your internal auditors will run their validation checks as part of their auditing processes. I think over the top of that, they'll do that sort of randomly, but you can include that as part of your internal audit processes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen customers where when they're using paper processes, the auditors would come and do a spot audit. Now they're able to see straight away that 100% of all contracts are compliant.
So our auditors would attend our office, and they still do every quarter. We would send a courier over to Ultimo, to our document storage facility. We've got a huge room over there full of paper contracts. They'd sift through, find the contracts that the auditor wanted to look at, bring them back out to our office, and the guys from the bank would sit there and turn the pages. Now, whenever they want to do an audit, we're an open book. They can log into our systems. They can pop those up on their screen and audit from their office in the city.
Do it from a good tablet in their office, hey?
Yeah, that's right.
By Telstra, from Telstra.
Yeah. One quick technical question for you, Lisa. Came in from the audience. Can you send a password via SMS? What are those verification steps, and what can they do? Yeah,
absolutely. So passwords can be sent by SMS. We could have an auto-generated number of any length. A lot of my banking customers will ask for, say, at Macquarie Bank, they have a MAC code, which is your Macquarie Access code, that you need to log in there. So however you'd like to work, you could even use things like your LinkedIn profile and log in as a second factor of authentication, or things like Facebook, to be able to pick.
Is that secure enough?
Well, remember, this is an extra layer of authentication on top of the fact that I've already sent it to your email address, I've sent an SMS code, and then...
Right, so it's one more step.
Exactly.
Right. So I wanted to ask you in the audience, what are your obstacles to implementing a system that reduces paper bottlenecks? I mean, are we talking about cost? Is it the security risk? Is it the use of different technologies that may not necessarily play nicely together? Your flexibility and the ease of setup, that it's just going to be more trouble than you think it's going to be worth. I'm really curious to hear, we've talked about where you are in your journey, and it sounds like a lot of you have taken that first step toward going, if not all digital, primarily digital, which is great.
Look, for me, I guess the biggest obstacle internally was the reliance people had on the hard copy of paper. Lisa mentioned that DocuSign started in 2002. If I think back to our business at that point, every morning contracts were arriving by the post, contracts were being printed out internally, and we knew how much work we had on by the size of the pile of those contracts sitting on the settlements officer's desk. Taking that away, taking that hard copy away, it's like we were taking their workflow away. As a contract moved through our workflow internally, the physical copy was passed from department to department, and I think that was the hardest part for people to let go of. And we overcame that. Like Lisa said, Outlook has probably become, for most people, their workflow. Everyone knows how busy their day is going to be by how many emails are sitting unread in their inbox. And DocuSign, you can log in there, you can see how many contracts have come in, and really that's become the workflow that people use now.
Yeah, we're seeing the split here between fragmented technologies and the ease of setup. I think, Chris, why don't I have you speak to the ease of setup, since that's an issue you've dealt with directly several times now with different companies. And what were the primary challenges that you faced in getting it set up and up and running?
I guess the first time around, we were a business who had outsourced 95% of our IT. We had one pair of hands internally who was really there to make sure that the business kept ticking. And when we came to integrate DocuSign, we didn't really have the expertise in-house to create the APIs and stitch it into our back ends. To overcome that, we really went out to our suppliers, and we got them in touch with the guys over in Seattle, and they worked really closely to get it up and running.
Yeah, and the other issue is the fragmented technologies. Now, Lisa, is this web-based? I mean, what's the way that everything plays nice together?
It's entirely web-based. We have a really rich partner ecosystem. So we have REST and SOAP APIs. We have a developer center that's available to our customers and to their other suppliers. So 5,000 integrations done so far, 80 out-of-the-box integrations. So we partner with the likes of Salesforce.com, Sugar CRM, Microsoft Dynamics. DocuSign is native to Office 365 and to SharePoint. Nintex is a workflow. These are some of the things that are popping out. So we play very nicely, Justin.
That's good. One would hope. You come in here.
No scratching, no biting.
I have a question coming in from Catherine. They are a B2B and a B2C organization, and I know that can be a challenge just to wrap your head around. Who am I talking to? What am I talking about? And how do we keep these files organized? And this is an open question for the group. How does DocuSign particularly, but how do digital transaction technologies help keep our business straight and keep us organized?
Look, probably the template library is a really good start. So even though everybody's using the same instance of DocuSign, your DocuSign login tailors your DocuSign experience. So as I said before, if I'm in the HR department, everything will be very much HR related. If I'm a customer-facing staff member, then it's very customer-oriented.
I think for us, when we log into our portal, the first thing we see is a dashboard. It tells us how many contracts we've got out for signature, how many contracts have just been returned, have been signed, and for me that's a really easy way to gauge how we're tracking as a business.
Yeah, look, I'd say from our organisation has become one of the largest licenses of DocuSign, and so the intention of Telstra is to use it very broadly across our customer-facing activity as well as in our supply chain. We're a large employer of people. We also deal with a lot of suppliers, but we've got advocates and champions, I think, proactively now trying to improve the way with which we work in a B2B environment as well as in a B2C environment. So I think it's finding those use cases where they're just no-brainers. Everybody knows it's broken. Everybody knows it needs to be fixed. And I think just start small and then just build out from there.
And to support that, Justin, it's such a good point, Rocky. We have a team of people called Customer Success Architects, and the CSA is a technical resource, but they're also someone we will embed within the business. Whether it's for 10 hours or whether it's like something like Telstra where it's a dedicated in-house resource, and they will sit there and have a look at those initial use cases, have a look at how quickly documents had been turned around pre and post DocuSign, what the cost savings were now that we've eliminated paper and printing, and build an ROI case for that, and then take it to the supporter within the business and say, look, if we could cost extend this amazing ROI to other areas of the business, and then that's when it becomes viral.
Yeah. So it sounds like the technology is stable and it's ready to go, but obviously every case is different. So we need to figure out what's going to be right for our business, how we can best use it, and what's the best way to do that.
Oh, but that's not a rhetorical question.
Not rhetorical. I mean, in a sense, I don't want to sound like infomercially, but if I want to start, where do I start?
I've got some DocuSign CSAs working in my business at the moment. We've got a project catalogue which would, there must be 50 major projects in train at the moment, and there's just no room to add anything to that list. But we can see the power of DocuSign, and we can see that there's other opportunities in the business. So we have the CSAs in there at the moment, and they're working through our business and coming back to us with ideas about where we can deploy it. And when we decide which opportunities we'll take up, they'll actually come in and help do the development and take that off the guys internally.
They do the heavy lifting. And something I saw Macquarie Bank do the other day, and I just thought it was fantastic in driving adoption, is they're holding a competition in their mortgage banking and finance sector where it's a $1,000 prize and a Telstra iPad mini for the person that comes up with the best idea for DocuSign. So they have to single out the use case and why their life and the customer's life would be improved. So it does a couple of things. First, you're getting the buy-in from the grassroots staff. But secondly, the DocuSign prioritisation team go, okay, right, this is something that's going to be really high ROI. We can turn around quickly. Okay, this is something that can wait because it doesn't get us people as excited.
Excellent. Well, go ahead, Brian.
Look, in summary, what I would sort of say is hopefully the viewers have heard some great examples of organisations at both bookends of the spectrum. You've heard about examples of where you've got global organisations who are very, very, very complex, who have implemented DocuSign, right down to really small, nimble, organisations that have done so. The important point is to make a start. Find a use case, and it'll be unique to your own organisation. But the important thing is to make a start.
Well, Greg, we've run out of time, but I want to thank Lisa Oldfield from DocuSign, Chris Patrick from Flexi Group, and Roxy Scopoletti from Telstra for joining us here on this call. You'll see a survey on the bottom of your screen, a little widget there. Please let us know what you thought about the chat here today, and if there's anything we can do in the future that you would find interesting, please let us know there as well. So thank you all for joining us here on this Telstra Virtual Event. I'm Justin Cleveland.